All right, I guess we'll get started. Let's see here. We'll start our second session of this unit of Foundations of Judaism called Holidays of History. This is our second session. We'll have a third and final session in this mini course next week, which will be July 1st. And then we'll go on to our new topic for July, which will be denominations and conservative Judaism and specifically. Today we'll be examining the holidays of history that have to do specifically with Israel and modern historical events. And next week we'll be examining holidays that have to do with the destruction of the temple and mourning. Last week, just as a review, we went over Hanukkah and Purim. And those are really Hanukkah and Purim are the holidays that are actually in the Talmud, and right, so they have sort of a different status and are really important. And the holidays we'll be really looking at today are modern holidays. They've been created by the Jewish people as a reaction to modern events that have happened and that we want to remember and are necessary and very important. But they feel a little bit different when they don't come straight out of the Gemara or the Talmud or the sages telling us that this is a mitzvah and everything like that. Very, very different. So they'll have different ways of talking about them, but still very, very important. So without further ado, I'll share my screen here. And let's see here. All right, do we see my screen? Wonderful. So, we've really been going into holidays that react and respond to historical events. And history is holy for Jews. Remembering our history, recounting it, and learning the lessons from it are sort of part and parcel of what it means to be a Jew. There also is really an idea of embodying the suffering and embodying the pain and the both the joy and the pain of what it means to be part of the Jewish people. The hardships we've went through in the past, celebrating the joys that we went through, are all ways of connecting with the Jewish people and feeling like feeling like a people together. All right, so the first holiday we'll look at is Yom HaShoah. Yom HaShoah means the day of the Holocaust, or the Shoah would be really means catastrophe, horrible tragedy, basically. And it's the day when the Jewish people remember and try to learn the lessons of the Holocaust. It's a day of course, mourning and remembrance, specifically the Holocaust of the 6 million during World War II. And of course, this is an event that really plays in our mind. It's deep in sensibilities of someone who grew up Jewish. For example, I remember being showed Schindler's List when I was in late elementary school, early middle school, because that was just what happened as a Jew. It was just part of the very food we ate, remembering the Holocaust. And many of the people I grew up with either had grandparents who were Holocaust survivors. My wife, two of her grandparents are Holocaust survivors. So it really plays a large role in Jewish history and in Jewish life. Really, the first thing to know about Yom HaShoah is why it's not International Holocaust Day. There is another day on the calendar, not on the Jewish calendar, but on the world calendar, that you'll see bandied about within discourse called International Holocaust Day. International Holocaust Day is another day which is to remember the Holocaust. And it's, of course, wonderful that other countries want to remember the Holocaust. But this isn't the Jewish day for remembering the Holocaust. Now, you might ask why. Why do there need to be 2 days in which to remember the Holocaust, or why can't we agree? Well, it really depends. There was really a great debate over when to remember the Holocaust. What day should we pick to remember the Holocaust? This decision was obviously made in after the Holocaust, so in the mid 20th century. And picking the day on which to remember the Holocaust is also really has to do with internalizing, what the meaning of the Holocaust is and what lessons we should draw out of it. So when the international community, like the UN, wanted to remember the Holocaust, they picked a day, um, which was the day in which Auschwitz was freed by the Allied forces, and how they freed Auschwitz in that regard. Now, Auschwitz, of course, was not freed by the Jewish people, was, thank God, freed by the Allied forces. And, so the message, I think, within that for many Jews is, well, if it wasn't for the non-Jews coming to save us, we would have been gone, and there would still be Auschwitz. Um, that's not the message I think that many Jews want to absorb, and it doesn't make sense to a lot of Jews. Of course, it's the non-Jews themselves who trespass this upon us. And of course, if you've watched the Ken Burns documentary on the American decision of when to bomb Auschwitz, when not to, we know that there was definitely an option for Allied forces to end the destruction of the Holocaust much earlier than they did. But there was a specific choice not to. It was, so many more millions of Jews died because of decisions like that. And also, I think there's sort of a tiredness of wanting to say that we as Jews need to just rely on non-Jews to save us. I think the Holocaust has taught many of us that Jews need to depend on themselves to not get killed and destroyed. It's for that reason that Yom HaShoah for really Israeli rabbis and the Israeli community is the one that really chose this, and we sort of follow them. Is they chose it specifically for the day in which the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, the day in which the Jewish community of the Warsaw Ghetto revolted and tried to fight for their own freedom. And of course, that was a failed effort, right? They didn't end up being able to do that, and didn't end up being good, but it really showcases Jewish resistance. And that's a much more comfortable area to really frame the Holocaust in as, to remember those who tried to resist and who tried to rise up against the Nazis, amongst the Jewish community of saving themselves. So that's the day in which we mark Holocaust Remembrance Day, or Yom HaShoah. That day is in the month of Iyar. It's usually in the summer to early summer, early spring, and that is sort of kind of what we do. So the major rituals of Yom HaShoah and Holocaust Remembrance Day are to really come together in community, and usually it's a ceremony in which we light 6 candles, and one candle representing each of the million Jews who were killed by the Nazis. And the tradition usually is to have originally Holocaust survivors light those candles, but now most Holocaust, almost, I think there might still be there's still some surviving Holocaust survivors, but mostly children of Holocaust survivor or even grandchildren of Holocaust survivors to keep the memory alive. So that's kind of what we do in community. We utter prayers of remembrance and mourning. It's always a popular communal event that happens. It's also a good thing to watch, Holocaust movies or learn about the Holocaust on this day, or visit a Holocaust museum or something like that on this specific day. We also have a tradition called Megillat HaShoah to also read names of those who were killed by the Nazis in the Holocaust. So reading names is obviously something that's very important and very much a par and parcel to what we do. But again, I think it's always important with Yom HaShoah to remember each time it comes, not just to remember for the sake of remembering, but to remember in order to prevent, right? In order to learn its lessons of what we should be learning from this specific day, and from remembering the Holocaust in this way. I just want to make sure. Oh, Claire's coming in. Okay, she's trying to get in again. Problem? Oops. Yeah, okay, there we go. All right, so that's Yom HaShoah. There's not so much because again, it's a newer holiday. So there's not that much to I'll go into it still being really developed, but it's an important day for many, just because the tragedy was so recent, and so very important to engage with. The modern Jewish communities are so affected by the Holocaust. We're so affected by its memory and the scarring from that incident that our Judaism is forever changed from it. And our relationship with God is certainly forever changed as well. So very important. Any questions about Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day? Any questions about this before we move to the next day? No, pretty simple. Okay. So next day we'll remember and we'll think about is Yom HaZikaron. Yom HaZikaron is really an Israeli holiday, and it's Yom HaZikaron really just translates to Memorial Day. Um, Zikaron is memory, Yom is day. So the Memorial Day is what you translate it as. And it really is Israeli Memorial Day when Israelis and Jews around the world remember Israelis who were, killed in the line of duty, um, fighting in the Israeli Defense Forces. And so it's really a day when we remember the sacrifices of the state of Israel and its people in order to defend Jews everywhere. Now, this is a really, really sad day. I think this surprises many Americans because Memorial Day in America is like kind of like not a very sad day. It doesn't seem like most people don't know soldiers who were killed or in the line of duty. Thank God America has kept its nose clean in terms of that. And not have had any major wars where the entire population was involved since something like World War II. So, it's been very different, and so for that reason, in America, Memorial Day is a day for barbecues and sales at department stores. It's a day off. For Israelis, it's not the case. Almost every Israeli, if not every Israeli, knows somebody who died in battle, if not a family member or a friend. Um, so the mourning is very intense and very real and very recent. These are all people who were killed, most of them in the prime of their lives. And in Israel, of course, there's a draft. So every Israeli has to serve in the military. That doesn't mean that every Israeli is a combat soldier, but has to serve in the military somehow. They basically graduate high school and they immediately have to serve in the military. So men serve for 3 years, women serve for 2 years. Um, and they must do their obligatory military service, and then usually Israelis will either travel for a little bit, and they usually travel around the world just to get out a little bit, and then they go to college. So they don't, unlike us in America, Israelis don't go to college after high school. They go to the military for 3 years, 2 to 3 years. Um, and because of this, it really does serve as, everybody's been a soldier in Israel. Everybody knows what that's like, and that creates a different ethic and aesthetic within the state. So the IDF really does, and the Israeli Defense Forces in Israel is really the people's military, right? Because really everybody's fought in it, at some point or been a member of it, and it's this great force within Israeli society. I mean, a lot of times the job you get or the job opportunities you're able to apply for and get is based on what your unit is, right? Because you can get connections through your military hookups and relationships in this regard. And there's like, it's almost like going to being in a good military unit replaces in some ways going to a good college. If you go to Harvard, you might get a better job than if you go to, I don't know, some random state school or something like that. So too in the military, in the IDF, if you are, in a combat unit or in a more decorated unit, you are more likely to get better job opportunities and better opportunities in general within Israeli society. So it really is a very different feeling. So for that reason, the day of Yom HaZikaron is very sad. If you listen to the radio in Israel, only sad songs are played on the radio the whole entire day. There's all these beautiful songs, terribly sad songs written about young men and women who've died in the line of service. And the tradition, really, many families go visit the grave, the soldiers' graves, on this day, and it's usually there's some sort of tekes, there's some sort of ceremony of memorial to remember those who were lost. The most famous thing about the day is the siren. That there's a siren. And I should say this also happens in Yom HaShoah as well, Holocaust, at least in Israel. That I forgot exactly the time of day when it happens. I believe it's like 10 a.m. or something like that. There's a siren that goes out across it sounds like an air raid siren, and it goes out across the whole entire country. And it goes on for about a minute and a half. And you can actually look up videos of this online if you want on YouTube. Because what happens is that everybody, no matter what they're doing, stops and gets out of their car or stands up at attention and in silence. And what's amazing is even in the highway. So if you can be on the highway in Israel at 10 o'clock on Yom HaZikaron, and every single person in the highway stops and gets out of their car and stands outside of their car. Even the most busiest street, it doesn't matter, where. And so it's really an incredible sight to see. All of a sudden, the whole entire country goes silent for a minute and a half, and it really is powerful. Something to really experience and try to be in Israel at some point during Yom HaZikaron, because that really is an awful feeling, right? It's something really special, and to see that solidarity that in this country in America, to be a Jew is very different than when you're in Israel, because in this country we're a minority. There are very few of us. People don't share, and it's not like you can go to your neighbor and they had the same tragedy that you've had. A lot of times, as a Jew in this country, it's very lonely, the pain that we are exposed to and feel. What's amazing about Israel is that everybody's connected to it, right? Everybody feels that same pain, and you can look around and everybody's sort of going through it together, and it's extremely meaningful. And as I said, the same siren goes off on Yom HaShoah too, as well, on Holocaust Remembrance Day. So it's also on that day as well. Really, really special. I definitely highly encourage you to look that up on YouTube and check it out, because you really get the feel. There's millions of videos on YouTube from different perspectives and different places and whatever. And you could really see what happens. One of the most horrible things that you see, though, in Israel is that it's a great way to tell Arab drivers in Israel, because when the siren goes off on Holocaust Memorial Day or Yom HaZikaron, the only people who don't stop, get out of their cars and stand at attention, are the Arab population. The Arab Muslim population doesn't stop and doesn't respect these days, of course. And so that's one differentiating factor that you can really see, and it's painful. I mean, I lived in Jerusalem for 2 years, so it kind of like ruins the moment when there's one or two cars that aren't doing it, right? But again, I think this shows the difference and the erasure of the pain of Israelis and Jews in Arab societies, and just very important to understand and know and cognize. People don't talk about that enough in America, but that's the reality. Any questions on Yom HaZikaron? No questions on Yom HaZikaron.
What time of year did you say this was?
It's a good question. Yeah, so it usually is a week after Yom HaShoah. I believe Yom HaShoah is early in the month of ER, and which is after Passover but before Shavuot. So it's usually sometime in the springtime or in the late spring. And so Yom HaZikaron is usually a week after Holocaust Remembrance Day. So they're very close to each other, these holidays. So that happens. That's that day. So is there any other questions you have about this holiday or any holidays that we've mentioned so far? No? Cool. All right, simple enough. The next holiday really is Yom HaAtzmaut. Yom HaAtzmaut is Israeli Independence Day. And just like we in America have July 4th, Israeli Independence Day is the day in which Israel declared independence from the UK, from the British Mandate at the time. The UN had a partition vote and voted in favor of partition, meaning partitioning the land of Israel between the Arab communities and the Jewish communities. Before that, really, it was under control of the British as a British colony that was won over from the Ottoman Empire after the destruction of the Ottoman Empire in World War One. So the British controlled it between World War One and through basically the end of World War Two. In 1948, you know, the UN decided to partition the state of Israel. At that moment, the Israelis sort of jumped on the opportunity and declared independence. They had created all of the structures of state and military and everything like that, and sort of were ready for this. So they declared independence. And if you've never read Israel's Declaration of Independence, it's very worth reading. It's really, really beautiful and really defines sort of what Israel is all about and still about. Um, Obviously on that day as well, the day that Israel declared independence was the day in which the War of Independence began. And every surrounding Arab neighbor of Israel decided to attack that day. And that started the War of Independence, in which 10% of the Israeli population was murdered and killed by these Arab surrounding armies. There was heavy, heavy losses, but thank God Israel miraculously came through and survived. That's why they're still in Israel today, which is an incredible miracle. Um, so again, people might say to you, especially when you're talking about Israel to people, oh, it's Israelis kicked all the Arabs out of the land and took over all their land. It's not true. There was a partition plan in the UN to split the land, and Israel took hold of the portion that the UN gave them and left the land that the Arabs were supposed to get for the Arabs, but instead they just used that to attack the Jewish people and destroy and take over the land that was given by the UN to Israel. So interestingly enough, Yom Ha'atzmaut is the day after Yom HaZikaron. So Yom Ha'atzmaut is really is unlike Yom HaZikaron. Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israeli Independence Day, is a day of total joy. It's a huge celebration. There are massive dance parties. That's the day when all the Israelis go out to the park and they have a nice barbecue. There's amazing parties. It's an incredible time to be in Israel. It's a almost ecstatic time to be in Israel on that day. Everybody's celebrating. Everybody's out doing stuff. You just see blue and white everywhere. It's really incredible. Um, but what's amazing truly is that it's literally the day after Yom HaZikaron. So Israelis basically spend the whole entire day. And remember, Jewish holidays start at night and end in the day. So they spend the whole entire Jewish day mourning and in darkness, listening to sad songs and visiting graves and everything like that. And immediately once it gets dark, they switch over and their sadness turns into ecstatic joy and dancing to celebrate the state of Israel and its independence and its independence. So there's something very patently Israeli and beautiful of like being able to make that transition between like utter sadness and the feeling of sacrifice and hardship and loss to utter celebration, right? And that's so much of what Jewish history is all about, right? Like with every good thing that's happened to us, there's been a lot of sacrifice. And so there's something really truly meaningful about these days. Now, there is a question here. One of the rituals that is done on this day is called Hallel, and this is the biblical obligation to say the Psalms between 113 and 119. And usually we sing these Psalms on days of usually biblical holidays, but holidays that are full of rejoicing, of redemption. So there has been many who have said that we should say Hallel on Yom Ha'atzmaut because it's the day in which we became independent and the state of Israel was the third Jewish Commonwealth was created after 2,000 years. Huge miracle, right? And so most, I would say, non-ultra Orthodox communities say Hallel of some sort on Yom Ha'atzmaut, including our community. Um, and most conservative communities or Jewish communities around the country. But there are some who don't say Hallel because they say, well, was it really God? Was this really miraculous? Does it really prompt saying Hallel? But that would be the major ritual on that day. We at Temple of Aaron have a Yom HaAtzmaut prayer service, in which is a prayer service in which we thank God for Israel. On this day, we read a special Torah reading and everything like this, and it's a wonderful event And really, it's the day in which we tap into reconnecting ourselves with Israel and recommitting to the state of Israel, which is so important. Okay. Um, Next and lastly, before we go on from Yom HaAtzmaut, any questions on Yom HaAtzmaut?
I know that you said on the Memorial Day that a lot of like Arab citizens of Israel don't participate. Do they participate? I would assume that they wouldn't participate in the Independence Day either, would they?
Yes, no, yeah, they don't participate. They actually, this is a day of mourning for them. They call it the Nakba, um,
Mm,
which means I think catastrophe in Arabic or something like that. And it's the day in which they mourn losing the land of Israel to the Jews. And so yeah, so they definitely do not celebrate on this day. And yeah, it's really a day of mourning for them.
mm.
So very, very important. Any other questions? No? Okay, the last holiday we'll explore today really is Yom Yerushalayim, is which really means Jerusalem Day. This is the most modern holiday that we'll look at today, and really it was created in 1967 after the Six-Day War, when the Jewish people and the Israelis conquered Jerusalem. So basically, what happened is during the Six-Day War, and again, if you are interested in converting, and you should read a book of Israeli history at some point, because this is just so much in the news today, and there's so much misunderstanding about this. Just read a good book on the factual history of what actually happened. I think that's really, really essential to know your facts with this, because as a Jew, you'll be challenged on this all the time, and most people haven't read anything, don't really understand the situation. So I just push you to do your own research and read books that are, and if you need suggestions on what books and what really are sourced well and everything like that, please let me know. I can certainly suggest you. But in the Six-Day War, basically, Israel originally took over, the land that was given to them by the UN, which we refer to now as Green Line Israel. Israel that was given to them fair and square by the UN. This did not include Jerusalem, famously, in the West Bank, because mostly Arabs lived there. And, that would have been, I think the British probably felt that this would be this would upset the Arabs too much to give the Jews Jerusalem. So it was actually given to the Jordanians, and the West, what now we call the West Bank and the old city of Jerusalem, is actually um, was actually Jordan back then. And so Jerusalem was really split in half. West Jerusalem was in Green Line Israel, and really run by the Israelis, and part of Israel, while East Jerusalem, which includes the old city, which was the ancient city of Jerusalem where the temple was and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and all the kind of the famous scenes, was owned by the Jordanians. And because obviously the Palestinians did not form their own country after the UN partition, so the Jordanians just took over that land in that time. And that's the way it was from 1948 to 1967. Um, Eventually, though, in the Six-Day War, there the Arab militaries, the Arab nations tried to destroy Israel again, tried to attack Israel from all sides, so sort of like a redoing of the Independence War. And again, they failed. There was thank God Israel did a preemptive strike and bombed all of the Egyptian planes, which gave them a strategic advantage and enabled them. There still were many losses in the IDF, but thank God they were able in 6 days to push off all these Arab armies. The one that's important to discuss now is really Jordan. The Jordanian military, again, entered from the east and tried to conquer Israel, um, and destroy Israel. And thank God the IDF was able to push them back, and not only push them back, but push them back beyond the Jordan River. And it's for that reason. And at that time, once that happened, the IDF basically wouldn't let the Jordanians military come back. They conquered that land because, again, this was a military idea of strategy to continually defend the state of Israel and keep the Jordanians away from Jewish communities so they couldn't attack them and do terrorist attacks and everything like this. So that was the original reason. But there was something beautiful there that all of a sudden the Jewish people reconquered eastern Jerusalem, including the Old City. And for the first time in 2,000 years, Jews were in charge and had sovereign control over Jerusalem, over all of united Jerusalem, over all of Jerusalem. And so this was a really big deal, and almost messianic in character that the Jews were able to go to the Western Wall, the site where the temple was built 2,000 years ago, and that was a really, really big deal. And it's for that reason that we celebrate this by the holiday of Yom Yerushalayim, or the day in Jewish parlance when Jerusalem was united again, back under Jewish control. Now, I mean, it's a hard holiday because, again, I think people feel different feelings about, what is usually called by the international community the occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem. So it's not an easy day. I wouldn't say it's celebrated by most non-Israeli Orthodox Jews. We don't celebrate it really at Temple of Aaron, for example. And the reason we really don't is because if you go to Jerusalem today, you do not feel that the city is united. There's extreme amounts of strife in Jerusalem, lots of tension between the Arab and Jewish communities. East Jerusalem is not a place that is safe for Jews. It's not a safe place to walk around. You can't wear any symbols in East Jerusalem that you're Jewish, otherwise you might be killed. So it's really not safe for Jews in East Jerusalem. The old city is okay for the most part, but once you go to the east of the old city, it's really dangerous and it's not a safe place for Jews to be. And I can tell you, if you need personal stories about that, I can certainly tell you. I lived in Jerusalem for 2 years, so I know it very well. And it's not good. And so, in my heart and my feeling, and I think for many of my colleagues in the more progressive movements, we really feel that this isn't a united Jerusalem. This is still very much separate and just very, very difficult situation. So it feels very strange to remember the unified Jerusalem on this day. It's also a day in which the settler movement in Israel, which are the people who build settlements in the West Bank, sometimes legal, sometimes illegal, to try to gain more land and try to push out Arab communities. They march through the Muslim quarter of the old city on this day, usually shouting racist epithets in celebration against Arabs. So obviously we distance ourselves from that and disconnect from that. That's not part of what we do. And obviously we don't approve of that in any way. For that reason, for the most part, at like Temple of Aaron and most conservative communities don't really celebrate Yom Yerushalayim. So that's basically the deal. Any questions on this? Any questions on this?
Not that I have, no.
No.
Nope.
Wonderful. Again, if you get anything out of this, please read a book on Israeli history. There's so many good books. And if you're a good reader, read a long one. Read one, a chunky one. Don't read, Noah Tishby's. If you're don't love reading, you could read Noah Tishby's one. And she just wrote in Israel. It's very popular. It's like 150 pages. It's an easy one to get through. But you really ought to know the history, even in a more detailed. You should know the dates. Because people will challenge you on this all the time, and very, very few people really understand the actual history. Definitely do the research for yourself. And so that's very important. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I guess we'll end a little early today. We'll go next week and we'll go and look at the holidays around the destruction of the temple. We'll be back in person next week, so I definitely invite you, if you can come in person, please do. But just due to childcare reasons, couldn't teach from synagogue today. So, but we'll be on in person and on Zoom next week. Thank you so much, everybody. Well, have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.